A man with a scarred back sits on a cold stone floor, listening to the clatter of Roman boots on the pavement outside. We think of a divine bulldozer that clears the path, removes the cancer, pays the debt, and silences the critics. And this was a beautiful truth for Paul to preach when he was holding a pen and crafting a theological argument. But theology always eventually moves from the parchment to the flesh. Years later, Paul will find himself writing a second letter to this exact same church, only this time, he is not teaching them an abstract concept. He is bleeding from a wound he cannot close. And, in the darkness of his own suffering, he is about to beg God for the very explosion he told them to reject. The theology of the cross is a beautiful architecture on parchment, but a jagged piece of wood lodged in your own skin is where the architecture is forced to hold weight. In his second letter to the Corinthians, Paul pulls back the curtain on his own private agony. He describes a physical affliction so intense, so unrelenting, that he calls it a scallops, in the Greek, a stake, a splinter, a sharp thorn driven deep into his flesh. We do not know the exact medical diagnosis. It could have been the blinding, infected eye disease common to the Mediterranean, or the bone-deep, shivering ache of malaria, or the lasting nerve damage from being stoned and beaten with Roman rods. Whatever it is, you can feel the desperation in his ink. He cannot sleep. We assume the power of God is the mechanism that removes our obstacles and crushes whatever is standing in our way. He cannot work without a grinding pain behind his eyes. The affliction is a localized fire that will not go out. So he begs for a rescue. 3 times. He drops to the dirt and asks God to take it away. He is asking for the explosive power of deliverance. He is asking God to clear the path, to blast through the obstacle, to heal the tissue and remove the fire. He wants the problem solved. Heaven responds with a rejection. The pain continues. The thorn remains. And God speaks a sentence that shatters the Roman understanding of authority entirely. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. The word Jesus uses for power is DUNAMIS. This is the moment the dynamite fallacy completely falls apart. If DUNAMIS meant an explosive, obstacle-shattering force, God would have detonated the thorn. He would have eradicated the affliction. But the divine strategy is doing something far more complex and far more durable than a simple medical extraction. The answer to his prayer is not a removal. It is an infusion. The Greek verb translated made perfect is teleo. It means to bring to a designed end, to complete a process. And it does carry that weight sometimes. But if you look closer at the letters this battered man is actually writing, to reach a final, intended destination, God is telling Paul that divine capacity does not just tolerate human fragility as an unfortunate byproduct of a fallen world. It actually requires it. The power reaches its absolute peak efficiency, precisely when the human vessel is entirely depleted. When Paul is strong, healthy, and rhetorically brilliant, he relies on his own stamina. He leans on his vast Pharisaical training. He operates on human capital. But when he is shivering on a cold floor, unable to see straight, and completely emptied of his own resources, a different engine takes over the operation. The weakness creates the vacuum. The dunamis fills it. The thorn is not a punishment for his vulnerability. It is the necessary circuitry for his endurance. Paul finally understands the mechanics of the cross applied to his own body. He stops praying for the pain to leave and starts boasting about his weakness, because the brokenness is the exact entry point for the strength. And this strange economy of weakness is not just an ancient apostolic survival tactic. There is a reason. Paul uses a very specific household object to explain this to the Corinthians. And that object is sitting in your house right now, at the specific Greek word he leans on. And most importantly, at the moments in his own life when he claims this power is most active. Walk into a garden center. Pick up a cheap terracotta planter. Run your thumb over the rough, unpolished rim. It costs $3. It fractures if you drop it on the pavement. It is common, fragile, and entirely replaceable. This is the exact image Paul uses in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. We have this treasure in jars of clay, to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. The English translation sounds poetic, but the Greek word is brutal. The word is ostrakinos. It literally means baked dirt. It was the disposable, low-grade Tupperware of the ancient world. You used it to carry water from the well, or store grain in the dark corner of a damp house. It is not fine china. It does not belong in a display case. And yet, Paul says this is the designated container for the dunamis of God. We hate this design. You spend your entire life trying to upgrade your vessel. You polish the exterior. You hide the fractures. You superglue the chipped edges back together before anyone notices. You assume a cracked life cannot carry the divine presence. You assume God only uses intact, flawless pottery. But look at the mechanics of a first-century clay lamp. It is a sealed ostrakinos bowl. You start to see something the triumphal reading completely misses. You realize the man holding the pen is not experiencing a miraculous rescue, filled with hot olive oil and a burning wick. When the clay is perfect and unbroken, the fire is entirely contained. The light only escapes through one tiny hole at the top. But when the vessel takes a hit, when the terracotta splinters, when a massive, jagged fissure runs down the side, the piercing light slashes out through the darkness in a dozen different directions. The fracture is not a malfunction. It is a revelation. Your breaking is not a disqualification from carrying the power of God. It is the exact mechanism He uses to distribute it. The Corinthians wanted a marble statue. They wanted a golden chalice. They wanted an unbreakable leader who never bled, never wept, and never lost a debate in the public square. But Paul hands them a shattered piece of baked mud and tells them to look at the blinding light pouring out of the cracks. The dunamis does not operate in your perfection. It operates in your inadequacy. It requires your depletion. It activates in the exact moment you have absolutely nothing left to offer. But how do you actually live this out? When the diagnosis arrives, when the bank account drains, when the marriage shatters, how do you stop fighting the breaking and start leaning into the hidden engine underneath it? The walls of his cell are not shaking. His eyesight is not returning. His enemies are not falling down dead. The human body is wired to interpret exhaustion as a catastrophic failure. When the adrenaline drains from your system, when your hands shake gripping a steering wheel, when the heavy, suffocating silence of a hospital waiting room presses against your eardrums, your brain automatically signals that you are losing the battle. We are conditioned by a modern empire of self-reliance to view our own fatigue as a lack of faith. We assume that if we were truly spiritual, we would never feel the crushing weight of anxiety. We would never taste the metallic panic in the back of our throats, and we would never lie awake at 3 a.m. wondering how we are going to survive the week. But the paradox of Paul's theology is that this exact point of total depletion is the only place the divine engine actually engages. We spend decades building our own personal empires of competence. We curate our resumes. We manage our reputations. And we try to project an aura of unshakable strength. We want to be the bronze statues of Corinth, impervious to the elements, commanding respect from everyone who walks past. We think this is what God wants to use. We assume He needs our strength, our polish, and our pristine track record to accomplish His purposes. God has absolutely no use for your bronze statue. Yet, He claims to be operating in the highest concentration of divine power available to a human being. He cannot pour His living water into a sealed, impenetrable block of metal. The dunamis requires a fragile, porous container. It demands a vessel that knows it is made of dirt. As long as you are managing the crisis with your own intellect, maintaining your polished exterior, and leaning on your own emotional capital, the divine strength remains dormant. It does not compete with your ego. It will quietly allow you to exhaust your own resources until you finally hit the solid, unforgiving wall of your own limitations. The power of God is not the backup generator that kicks in to keep your carefully constructed life running. It is the resurrection that happens after your self-reliance completely dies. When the Roman whips tore the flesh from Paul's back, they were simultaneously stripping away his reliance on his pharisaical pedigree, his brilliant intellect, and his unyielding willpower. The physical pain was real, the isolation was crushing, and the thorn in his flesh was agonizing. But beneath the sensory nightmare of his suffering, a massive, silent transfer of power was taking place. He was trading the exhaustible fuel of human effort for the unyielding, steady, unstoppable energy of the divine presence. Faith is not the ability to grit your teeth and ignore the pain. The power of God is not the force that prevents your breaking. It is the substance that flows through your cracks. It is the terrifying willingness to let the pain dismantle your illusions of control. This is the hidden engine of the Christian experience. It is the realization that your inadequacy is not the barrier to God's work, but the exact canvas He requires. And this is where the ancient theology reaches across 2,000 years and directly intercepts your specific reality. Because the pattern of this power does not just belong to Paul. If you trace this thread all the way through, you see a rhythm that refuses to make sense to a Roman mind, but changes everything for ours. A man dictated a letter in a damp prison cell, and the empire of muscle began to crumble. A Roman colony worshipped bronze and status, and a bleeding rabbi on a wooden cross shamed their wisdom. A Swedish chemist named an explosive, and a modern church chased a violent force that was never promised. A dying savior absorbed the crushing weight of cosmic rebellion, and the steady, unyielding strength of heaven held him to the wood. A beaten apostle begged 3 times for his thorn to be removed, and God answered by moving into the wound. This is not just a theological debate about an ancient text. It is a matter of spiritual survival. A cheap terracotta jar cracked on the pavement, and the piercing light inside finally slashed through the dark. A human being hits the absolute wall of their own exhaustion, and the divine engine finally engages. One word. One unyielding power. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the baked dirt. Not the polished bronze of Corinth, not the unbroken marble statues of the empire. The cheap, disposable ostrakinos that we spend our entire lives trying to superglue back together before anyone notices the cracks. The fact that the architect of the universe looks at the fractured edges of our lives and does not see a ruined vessel to throw away, but the exact mechanism required to release His light. If you are in a season where your personal resources are completely depleted, where you have begged for an explosion to clear the path, and all you received was silence, stop fighting the breaking. You are not failing. You are being hollowed out. The weakness is not a disqualification from carrying His presence. If you misunderstand what Paul means by power, you will spend your entire life begging God for a rescue He has no intention of sending. It is the necessary circuitry for His endurance. And may the God who has never once required your perfection walk with you through your deepest exhaustion and fill every fracture with a strength you could not have manufactured on your own. If this reached something in you today, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted from trying to hold their own life together. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts, and dictates a letter to a city obsessed with winning. The air in the room smells of damp wool and stale bread. You will assume you are doing something wrong because the pain has not stopped. You will think God is silent when He is actually doing His deepest work. You will feel abandoned in the exact moment you are being equipped. To find the actual meaning, you have to look at the Greek word Paul chose. But to feel the weight of how truly offensive that word was to his original audience, you have to step outside that damp room, past the Roman guards, and look at the empire that defined what power was supposed to look like. In the first century, power was not an abstract philosophy. It was a pavement. It was the heavy, rhythmic thud of hobnailed sandals hitting stone roads that stretched from Britannia to Judea. It was the polished bronze of a legionary's breastplate catching the glare of the Mediterranean sun. It was the smell of cheap incense burning on a marble altar before a statue of a deified emperor. The Roman world breathed a very specific atmosphere, and that atmosphere was dictated by imperium absolute, unyielding, top-down authority. The ancient world had no category for a vulnerable God. They did not build hospitals for the sick, and they did not write poetry about the marginalized. If a child was born with a physical defect, it was left on a hillside to the wild dogs and the winter chill. His hands, resting on his knees, bear the distinct, raised ridges of a leather whip. He is half blind. He is frequently sick. Weakness was not a phase to be sympathized with. It was a contagion to be avoided. In the Roman mind, power is not the ability to endure suffering. It is the capacity to inflict it. And nowhere was this obsession with climbing, dominating, and projecting strength more concentrated than in the city of Corinth. Corinth was a Roman colony, a city completely leveled by Rome and then rebuilt a century later by Julius Caesar. It was populated heavily by freedmen, former slaves, who were hungry for status, desperate to prove their upward mobility, and eager to establish their own dominance. It was a city of new money, roaring bronze foundries, and the Isthmian Games. You can almost hear the clash of silver coins in the agora, and smell the sweat of athletes wrestling in the dirt, competing for a wreath of withered celery and a moment of civic glory. They measured a man's worth by how many clients he had, how much property he owned, and how loudly he could command a public forum. They worshipped the aesthetic of success. If you wanted to start a religious movement in Corinth, you needed a mascot of absolute victory. You needed a philosopher king, a wealthy patron, or a conquering general. You certainly did not need a crucified Jewish carpenter. To a Roman citizen, the cross is not a symbol of religious devotion. It is a billboard of state terror. He is a walking monument to physical vulnerability. He is writing to Corinth. It is a city built on bronze and muscle. Crucifixion was the empire's way of publicly stripping a human being of every ounce of dignity, agency, and breath. It was a brutal, visible guarantee that Rome held the power, and the victim was nothing. Yet this is exactly where Paul drives his stake into the ground. He writes a letter that arrives in the middle of this glittering, status-obsessed city, and he refuses to play their game of rhetoric and wealth. Instead of offering them a philosophy of upward mobility, he introduces a specific Greek word. It is a word they know well, but he is about to attach it to an image that will make their stomachs turn. A reed pen scrapes across rough papyrus. A wax seal hardens in the candlelight. A leather satchel changes hands. A wooden ship crosses the choppy Aegean Sea. The scroll arrives in a packed, smoke-filled dining room in Corinth. The air inside is thick. The smell of roasting meat from the pagan temple of Apollo drifts through an open window. Torches flicker in the draft. A man breaks the seal. He unrolls the parchment. He reads the letter aloud. The room is deeply divided. Wealthy merchants sit on cushioned couches. Day laborers stand near the door. Former slaves lean against the cold plaster walls. They are expecting a philosophical treatise. They are waiting for rhetorical brilliance. They want Paul to validate their status. A culture that worships upward mobility, athletic dominance, and total control. And into this epicenter of human strength, they want him to applaud their spiritual superiority. Paul refuses to play their game. He does not give them a ladder to climb. He drags them to a Roman execution site. The reader dictates 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18, "For the word of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing." The Greek word for foolishness is moria. It means absolute idiocy. It means utter nonsense. The listeners shift on their feet. But to us, who are being saved, the reader pauses. He drops the anchor. It is the power of God. The word is DUNAMIS. Paul uses it again in verse 24. He uses it in chapter 2. He builds his entire argument on this single Greek noun, DUNAMIS. It rings out in the cramped room. It is a heavy, muscular word. It means strength. It means ability. It means an overwhelming, unstoppable force. A Roman legion marching in unison possesses DUNAMIS. A bronze shield wall holds DUNAMIS. A governor signing a death warrant exercises DUNAMIS. It is the currency of the empire. But Paul rips this word out of the hands of Caesar. He attaches it to a blood-soaked piece of wood. He pairs it with a naked, gasping Jewish rabbi. He links it to the ultimate symbol of imperial humiliation. This is intentional. This physically broken man drops a phrase that will echo for 2,000 years. The power of God. The paradox is supposed to shock them. The cross is not an unfortunate tragedy waiting for a future victory. It is the victory itself. Paul takes the ugliest, weakest thing the world has ever seen, and he calls it the ultimate manifestation of divine strength. The Corinthians hear the scandal. They feel the friction, but modern readers miss the shock entirely. We read the English word power, and we filter it through a modern lens. We let a linguistic myth infect the text. And that myth traces back to a Swedish chemist living 18 centuries after Paul died. In 1867, a Swedish chemist named Alfred Nobel patented a volatile mixture of nitroglycerin and absorbent earth. He needed a name for his new invention. He wanted a word that captured the violent, sudden, mountain-shattering force of his creation. So he reached back into ancient Greek, grabbed the word DUNAMIS, and called his invention Dynamite. And for a century, well-meaning Christians have been using a Swedish patent to define a first-century theology. You have probably heard a sermon on this. The speaker paces the stage, raises his voice, and declares that the power of God inside of you is dynamite. We are told that God's dunamis is an explosive force designed to blow up your obstacles, blast through your financial barriers, and shatter your sickness into 1,000 pieces. We imagine the acrid smell of sulfur, the crack of limestone, and the dust clearing to reveal a perfectly smooth path forward. He says it again and again. He builds his entire argument on it. He stakes his life on it. Most people assume, but there is a massive linguistic problem with this reading. First-century Greeks knew absolutely nothing about explosives. When Paul dictates the word dunamis to the church in Corinth, the root he is drawing from is the verb dunamai. It simply means to be able, or to have capacity. It is not a sudden, violent eruption that destroys everything in its path. It is a sustained, unyielding energy. It is the steady, grinding mechanism of a heavy wooden water wheel turning constantly against a rushing river. It is the same word Jesus uses in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, when he tells his disciples, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you." He is not promising them a life of explosive, obstacle-clearing victories. He is giving them the internal capacity to endure the brutal martyrdoms that are waiting for almost all of them. If you have ever felt like a spiritual failure because the explosive miracle you prayed for never came, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we go deeper into the text to recover the freedom that translation often obscures. So Paul is not writing about an explosion. He is writing about an endurance. Dynamite blows things apart. Dunamis holds things together. When you recover that original meaning, the offense of the cross finally makes sense. The Corinthians are looking at the crucifixion and seeing absolute weakness. Because they see a man bleeding out. They know exactly what that phrase means. We hear the word power, and our minds immediately default to force on a piece of rough wood. Paul looks at the exact same Roman cross and sees absolute dunamis. Because he sees a man carrying the crushing weight of cosmic rebellion and not breaking under the load. The power of God is not the explosion that removes your suffering. It is the capacity to remain anchored inside of it. And this is not just abstract theology for Paul. It is a reality he is about to experience in his own physical body, on a road he never wanted to walk. The iron spike grates against the bone of a human wrist. A heavy wooden mallet falls, and the dull thud echoes against the limestone quarry just outside the city walls. Blood pools in the Judean dust. The sky turns an unnatural, suffocating black at midday. This is not an explosion. This is an endurance. Look closely at the man hanging on the middle cross. If you define power as the ability to dominate, this is the ultimate, humiliating defeat. The crowds walking by the execution site hurl insults at him. They mock his claims. They challenge his status. They look up at his bruised, bleeding face and scream, "If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." We picture the Red Sea splitting in half. We imagine fire falling from a blue sky on Mount Carmel. They are asking for dynamite. They are demanding an explosive, mountain-shattering display of force. They want him to rip the iron from his flesh, shatter the Roman spears, call down fire from the blackened sky, and obliterate his enemies. They want the power to destroy. He refuses. He stays on the wood. He pushes his torn back against the splintered beam just to draw a single, agonizing breath. He tastes the sour, cheap wine pushed to his lips on a sponge. He absorbs the crushing, invisible weight of cosmic rebellion. He does not use force to escape the pain. He used DUNAMIS to endure it. The centurion stands at the foot of the cross and sees a dying rebel. The religious elite stand in the distance and see a silenced heretic. The empire looks at the naked, gasping body and sees a permanent warning. But they are all blind to the hidden machinery of redemption. The capacity to bear the sins of the world without retaliating requires more strength than the capacity to vaporize a Roman legion. It is the steady, unyielding, immovable energy of a love that will not let go. The cross is not a temporary lapse in divine strength. It is the masterpiece of it. When Paul tells the status-obsessed Corinthians that the cross is the dunamis of God, he is rewiring their entire universe. He is telling them that God's ultimate strength is revealed in his willingness to be broken